Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me. Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com is still my email. It's still in the description below. It is your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any of our platforms. Please reach out to me directly. I am T Mosso at thewatchbox.com for pricing. Today we are discussing the latest version of the Omega Seamaster Planet Ocean chronograph in Sedna red gold and stainless steel. This watch is 45.5 millimeters in diameter. I measure it 19.1 millimeters thick, and from lug tip to lug tip, 52.1 millimeters across the wrist with a 22 millimeter spacing between the lugs. Now you can see on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, this watch is a little bit large for me. I'll let you decide whether this is actually a fit, because it might look fine to you. I think it's a little bit large. I would prefer to wear this watch on a wrist minimally 17 centimeters in circumference. And you can see on any wrist, it's super thick, so not going to fit beneath the dress cuff. The strap is fully integrated, which means there's no gap between strap and case flank, so it traces the arc of the case flank, but also the curvature of the lug down. It's a combination of medium rectangular scale alligator leather in dark blue with a rubber strap base. So this strap helps to isolate the sweat, heat, moisture, and grit of the wrist from the leather, so it'll last longer. There's a gusset in rubber so that the buckle will not gouge the leather. But if you do want to take this in the water, I recommend using a full rubber strap. Taking a quick look at the buckle, it's a combination of satin and polish externally and satin and polish internally. Twin trigger release, which means you must press both before it opens. And then we have these two little tabs and a pin. And what happens is the strap tucks in. When you size it down, it buckles in, and then all the excess length hides underneath the strap and the clasp, so there's no need for minder loops, and all the excess length is hidden away. This is a long-running clasp that's been with us for at least 2 decades in the Omega collection, but it's still around because it works so well. Now the case is a combination of polish and satin in both steel and red gold. You can see that the cap of the helium escape valve, that has been media blasted. So has the outer face of the crown. Now this is a lyre style lug case. It's been with us on Seamasters and Speedmasters since the early 60s. So we have an inward bevel and an outward bevel, with the outward bevel polished. You can see the hallmarking of the solid gold bezel right under the knurling right there. We have a shear guard profile where the crown and pushers are somewhat recessed for their protection. Then we have a combination of red gold and blue ceramic for the chronograph pushers. And I should mention that while they look like they might be screw downs, these are just shoulders to protect them from shearing. You have access to the chronograph at all times. You do not need to screw the shoulders in or out to lock them against water or to activate them for use. Now the crown is a screw down. The watch is 600 meters water resistant, and when you open the helium escape valve before dive, you allow any helium gas that might intrude during saturation diving to exit the watch, which protects you against blowing out the seals and the sapphires. And provided the valve is open, that'll occur right about the time the internal pressure exceeds external pressure by 2 to 3 bar. Now we have a wonderful, beautifully indexed and refined 120-click unidirectional rotating timing bezel. It can be used to time events up to 60 minutes, which is handy because it's easy to time something between 30 and 60 minutes on a dive bezel, often much more difficult to do on a chronograph minutes register. And because you could see that we have a twin register chronograph, but a tri-register readout, we have coaxial and superimposed chronograph minute and hour hands that can be a little bit difficult to read precisely, so I prefer to time things with the bezel against the vintage-inspired broad arrow-style minute hand. And the Planet Ocean collection arrived in 2005, initially before the Seamaster 300s. This was supposed to be the vintage-inflected collection, which is why, for example, it includes a twin register design like a vintage chrono and these broad arrow hands like a 1950s or early 60s Seamaster. The bezel insert is made of ceramic, and the gold, known as Ceragold, is perma-bonded into the ceramic so it can never separate. The dial, you can see the chemical formula of ceramic, zirconium oxide. The dial is glossy, gleaming, scratch-resistant, and eternal. It will never fade, it will never tarnish. It has all the beauty and longevity of enamel without the fragility and expense. We have rose gold logo, marquee, hands, indices, and numeral 12. This is to resist, likewise, tarnish and oxidation over time. Let's do a lume shot here. As you can see, Every hand on the dial is luminescent, and Omega gives you differential lumes. So you can see the bezel pearl and the minute hand in green, so at a glance in the dark or in the depths, you can read them against each other and discern the passage of the most important time, which is your dive time. There are some functions here that are worth mentioning. There is a time zone function that allows you to actually keep the watch running, including the chronograph, but I can move the hour hand, and I can move it forward and backwards as I change my locality and jump time zones. I can also move the date forward and backwards depending on whether I'm crossing the international date line. The dial base is mirror polished. You can see the sub-registers feature concentric patterns. We have a hacking or stop seconds function. Now you set everything in sync and it stops everything, including the chronograph. The chronograph has a column wheel for crisp actuation, and you could see that through a skeletonized bridge just above. That's traditional chronograph construction, highly desirable, a very crisp feel, a very crisp sound. Now, it also has a vertical clutch, which means if you wish, you can leave the chronograph running full time without any hazard to the watch. And when you start the chronograph, you can see there's no jump or stagger because a vertical clutch, unlike a lateral clutch, has no play. It's seamless, so it always engages smoothly and reads precisely. Flipping it all over, you can see 600-meter dive depth, caliber 9900. This is the master chronometer version of the 9300. So automatic winding with bidirectional action, twin barrels for an even torque curve so it doesn't surge when fully wound or start losing time as it discharges. The two barrels give you a 60-hour power reserve. You have a full balance bridge with a free sprung balance for shock tolerance, anti-magnetic escapement, balance staff, and silicone hairspring, granting the watch near immunity to magnetism. Over 15,000 Gauss is effectively amagnetic. The watch is a METAS certified master chronometer, which means it meets all the COSC standards, but it goes beyond. Tested in 6 positions, not 5, as a fully cased up watch, not a bare movement. Tested for precision, yes, to the COSC timing standards, but also beyond, including shock resistance, anti-magnetism, water resistance, winding efficiency, power reserve. And it's not the fox guarding the henhouse, because Omega didn't create this standard with the Swiss Federal Institute of Metrology just for Omega. Tudor is now certifying master chronometers. It's a more demanding standard, but it's very much an open standard to anyone who can meet its criteria. Now, taking a look at the balance, you can just barely see it, but below the balance, there's a secondary bridge for the coaxial escapement, created by independent watchmaker George Daniels of Britain. Initially conceived in 1974, he sold it to Omega during the 90s. They industrialized it in 1999, and they've really been perfecting it ever since. It is a double impulse, direct and indirect impulsing escapement that utilizes tangential friction rather than the sliding friction of a traditional Swiss lever. This is the tri-level version that achieves all his original aims of improving precision, reducing maintenance requirements, and extending power reserve. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.